Good evening and welcome to Plain Talk. My name is Christopher Ram. Just a small error in the spelling of my guest's name. It's Haynes. Anyway, he's an entrepreneur, Guyanese, member of the Diaspora, and always visiting Guyana. So it's always a pleasure. Floyd, to have you.
Pleasure is mine, Chris. I'm glad to be here. It's always good to be home.
Now, you have a second home, America.
Yes, sir.
You have a president that goes about offering to buy other people's country. No, unfortunately, he was serious.
That's what I heard. That's what's been reported.
How does it? You're heading into elections, and I don't mean Guyana's elections. Let's think of somebody else's elections for now.
Sure.
We're talking about the United States elections. November next year, the presidential elections. How does the West Indian diaspora, I'm going slightly wider than the Guyanese diaspora.
Sure.
How does the West Indian diaspora view Donald Trump?
Well, I think all immigrants in America sees Donald Trump's policies as an affront to us as immigrants. Some of the policies that the new administration has advocated seems to suggest an anti-immigrant sentiment, which is very un-American. As we all know, America was built by immigrants. So as an immigrant, West Indian immigrant, or any other form of immigrant, I think there is concern.
But there's concern, perhaps if you can explain that, and then I'll come back to you. Concern about what?
Well, so...
he's not shutting out persons who are there legally.
No, not at all. Well, let me just say this. I think most of the debate over immigration has been overly politicized. Everything in America is overly politicized, and therefore you don't really get to the heart of the issue. There is a legitimate argument to be made for legal immigration. I don't think anybody is against that.
Yes.
However, by the time the policies are filtered down through the various media, essentially it's reduced to a very simple binary choice. One side wants immigration, the other side doesn't. I think that's an oversimplification of the problem. America shares more than a 2,000-mile border with a developing country, Mexico.
Yes.
That brings with it a set of problems that are unique to a developed country. And so there are various ways of how you deal with that. One can disagree with the various methods used, but I don't think there's anybody who would be against insisting that immigration happens the right way. Join the line, apply for residency or citizenship, get accepted, become part of the American society, live the American dream.
Now, two things Donald Trump, and we know his ideas about Mexicans being rapists and murderers, and he prefers people from Norway, clearly meaning the light-skinned people. But Donald Trump is suggesting that this business of chain immigration, you have a relative in the United States, he can bring, it extends to families. You have what I think is called the anchor baby.
The anchor baby, yeah.
The Guyanese woman goes to the United States,
have a baby,
gets an American, What's the view again of the West Indian diaspora on those types of inclinations, almost policies, that Trump is trying to promote.
Yeah, I don't think it's policy per se. It's hyperbole. Let me tell you where I think the West Indian diaspora is. As West Indians always are, we tend to be on the right side of issues. West Indians are for legal immigration, but we prefer that illegal immigration be handled in a humane way. And that's sort of treading the needle. But that's sort of where West Indians fall. We are upholders of the law, but at the same time, the human side of us wants to make sure that whatever is done to discourage or deal with illegal immigration, it's done in a humane way, in the most humane way. And that's where West Indians are. I think that's where, by the way, most people are. It isn't what gets filtered and what comes across in the mainstream media, because I think the entire media now has become sort of a theater of entertainment, and they have to, each side has to sell wolf tickets to its audience.
Now, the view of Trump as misogynistic, and this white nationalist, is that view again shared by the West Indian diaspora? I keep sticking there.
Yeah. I don't think we're a monolith in that sense. Like all other groups, I'm sure there are West Indians who are Democrats and West Indians who are Republicans. And so I don't know that there is one view shared by...
Statistics suggest it wouldn't be many, though, on the Republican side.
Yeah, perhaps. But again, West Indians are people who migrate, go to a foreign country, become part of the system, work hard, play by the rules, and mind our business. We don't typically get into those type of sensational type things. It doesn't affect us, and so we don't really deal with it. Now, I'm sure if you were to have a side conversation with many West Indians, they'll probably give you their personal view of the situation. But I don't think we allow those things to get in the way of what we went to America for.
We talked just now about the support West Indians who are Republicans, West Indians who are Democrats. Trump has engineered, whether it is part of the spillover and the trend from the Obama years, the lowest unemployment rate in 50 years.
Yes.
Now, that has meant that just about anybody who wants work can get work. There's a certain statistic that they're looking for 7.5 million people.
Yes.
With certain skills, and they don't exist. Why is there such a, if not antipathy, lack of support for Trump among the blacks and the migrants, the Mexicans and all of them?
I think by and large it's the rhetoric. The rhetoric gets out ahead of the actual policy. What he says sometimes is far more outrageous than what he does. And so far his policies have worked, certainly economic policies. I myself am a free market capitalist. I may differ from you in that sense. But the whole idea of rolling back regulations and allowing the free market to do its thing, I think has benefited and contributed to the economic growth we've seen.
But there's a limit to which you can do that. There's a limit to which you can remove environmental controls. There's a limit to which you can lower interest rates.
Yes.
Isn't there? There's a limit to which you can lower taxes.
Of course.
In 2019, the deficit in the United States will be $1 trillion.
Absolutely.
So, how long are you going to feed this economy so that the stock market benefits, but you have costly deficits?
Well, at
So
some
there's a
point,
downside. The point I'm trying to make, Floyd, is there's a serious downside to Trump's policies.
Well, I don't think the deficit started under Trump. And let me make it clear, I'm not here as a defender of Trump by any means. What I am a defender of is free market capitalism. I think it works. The market is the best arbiter of resources within the society. And historically, it has lifted more people out of poverty than any other thing we have tried. The market isn't perfect; it has its flaws, and there are always going to be market imperfections. And where there are market imperfections, then government must step in and fix those things. And there are several incidents where the markets just don't work, or there's a market failure. But where the market fails, government should step in. But that is very different than having government be the arbiter of everything, what we historically used to call central planning, which has been a disaster.
Well, that sounds like rhetoric as well, because it can simply be regulation. You're saying if things go wrong, the government should step in. Why ought it not be the duty and the right to regulate so that you prevent, rather than you try to out a fire, you prevent a fire?
Well, regulation is welcome. I mean, the government should be
But
a
Trump
referee.
Is trying to remove lots and lots of regulations.
Well, tell me one that he has removed that. Again, you're putting me in a position of defending Trump, but I am defending the free market. The government, in free market economics, the government is seen as a referee. The government should make sure that the playing field is leveled, that individuals play fair, that you don't take advantage of me, I don't take advantage of you. You're allowed to do whatever you want to do, as long as what you're doing doesn't infringe on my right to do what I want to do.
Well,
It's sort of Adam Smith. It's an old argument.
I know, but it's an old argument. It's been tried. You're right. We have tried other systems. They haven't quite worked. But you can't, the Scandinavian countries, you can't say that the Scandinavian countries are market-based in the Trumpian sense. And I want to get back to about what should be permitted.
Yes.
Now, global warming. That's a serious existential problem.
Of course.
Now, the free market, how does the free market prevent that?
The free market can't prevent it, but I would submit that most of the problems in history has been solved by the market. There has been a market solution. The same way the market got us to the moon, the same way, and I
don't think the market got us to the moon. No, I don't agree with that. Remember, John F. Kennedy,
Yes.
after he had issues in the 60s, and said, look, we, America, will put a man on the moon within the decade.
Right. But
That was the market.
No, but all of the technological know-how that goes into those type of things were developed in the marketplace. I think there is an existential threat. That there is an existential threat coming with the climate change issue. But I think that the solution to that will have to come from the free market. I don't think government by itself can solve that problem.
Well,
Governments
but the
can't even make the trains run on time. They can't even get your mail out on time.
but
They're going to solve the environmental problem?
I don't think that's a fair analogy. I really don't.
And by the way, let me go back to the Scandinavian. Let me stick a pin because I don't want you to get away with that. Everybody touts the Scandinavian model.
I didn't. I simply said it's not a full free market.
It is very much a economic free market system with social safety nets,
Yes.
which is a very good model.
Mm-hmm.
But make no mistake about it, it is a free market economic system.
But
It's competitive
we
choice.
we were just now talking about about climate change.
Yes.
They are driving climate change from the state level.
I think the state has to drive it, but there are several ways the state can drive it. The state can provide, and I think Obama had it exactly right. The state can provide incentives so that businesses can listen. We're going to invent our way out of this problem. We're going to have to. And I'm not an environmental scientist.
So you don't think there's a tipping point if we don't manage it very well?
Some of the studies I've seen says even if we all stopped burning fossil fuel, human beings that is, it's still not enough to change the calculus. And so we're going to have to invent our way out of that problem. I think government has a major, if not a primary role in that, but government's role is to incentivize industry so that they can come up ultimately with the solutions that will solve that problem.
Well, how and I know you're not, and I'm not suggesting it at all. Regardless of who is here, I would be asking the same question.
Yeah.
How does the removal of emission control help to incentivize towards solving the climate change problem? In other words, reducing emissions.
I am not an advocate of that. I wouldn't defend that. I would not defend that. I think emission control is one way by which the government can use its power to incentivize the right types of behavior. And ultimately, once you have controls in place, industry tend to invent solutions that solve the problems. Historically, that's the way it's been.
But as we said, there is a tipping point. So all the scientists are telling you that. You know, and again, I agree with you if we only look back. We know that Malthus, when everybody thought...
Malthus, the famous
absolutely
economist, right?
Absolutely.
Population is growing at a geometric progression and food supplies and arithmetic. We're going to starve, and we invented ourselves out of that problem.
But there are some things that might not be that easy.
I don't think anything is
climate
easy.
change, for example. I mean, we know lots of the Arctic region is warming. It's warming at a dangerous rate.
Yes. No, there's no question but that it's a major threat, and it ought to be taken seriously. And countries all over the world has got to have a hand in this. That's the other thing. You still have to get China and India on board, and all of the developing countries, all of Africa. You've got to get them all on board. And while we're doing that, I think we have to incentivize our best minds to come up with solutions that can help to solve that. In other words, you cannot solve the problem by non-action, simply by saying, let's cut back on the amount of fossil fuel we burn. That is a contributing factor. It helps. But that alone, most of the scientists have argued that just merely not using as much fossil fuel as we have been in the past, just cutting back alone wouldn't get us there.
No one thing will.
Right. So,
but they all help.
They all help, absolutely. But ultimately, I think it's sort of both. While we're cutting back on the use of fossil fuel, and we're using renewables, and we're moving towards a green economy, all that's helpful. But at the same time, we should be looking for, I believe, technological solutions. And that will come out of industry.
Well, technological solutions, renewable energy.
Yeah, better exhaust, better emissions. I mean, things we haven't even imagined yet, I think, will come out. We cannot know what technology will deliver 10, 20, 30 years from now.
I'm not asking you if you agree, because I don't want you to say you're not defending Trump. Why do you think America withdrew from the Paris Accord?
I don't know. I believe there is a sense on the part of some that it wasn't worth the paper it was written on. That's not my view, but I think that's the view of some people. China wasn't a part of it. as far as I know.
No Chinese.
The Paris Accord, there is?
Yes, yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
I have to go back and check. I didn't think so.
They are.
Okay, but there are 1.3 billion people, and you want them to be a part of it. So everybody is. I mean, I haven't done. It's not my area of specialty, but I don't know why America or Trump, the Trump administration, I think, withdrew. I have no idea, and I wouldn't even pretend to be able to explain that.
As you said, you yourself are an entrepreneur, and I wouldn't even want to say how successful you are.
Yeah.
But surely, renewable energy,
Yes.
solar power,
Yes.
wind power, hydropower.
Yeah.
These are all great areas.
And by the
for the
way,
private sector.
I was just gonna say, by the way, all market-driven solutions,
No.
right?
Yeah.
Government hasn't created solar panels; it's the market, right? The technology
But it's
that
government
will come out.
policies.
Well, that's what
Government
I'm
policies
saying.
that help.
That's precisely the point I was making earlier when I said government can incentivize industry to come up with the ultimate solution, and that's really where government should spend most of its time and energy. Obama's cap and trade I thought was a very good start because it was going in that direction. But that's where government. And again, I'm a CPA. I'm a businessman. I listen to these things like everybody on the news. But there's people who do this stuff for a living, and they're better informed at at solutions.
Now, Guyana is blessed with two very competing challenges.
Yes.
Fossil fuel, on
Yes.
the one hand, with all the promises of catapulting us
Yes.
into the first world,
Yes.
practically.
We hope.
We hope. I'll ask you about
But you
that.
said promises, so that's
Yes,
good.
yeah. And at the same time, we are blessed with forests that are virgin.
Yes.
We have fantastic water quality, air quality. We still have reasonably modest use of fossil fuel on a general scale. How does a country like Guyana, and I know you must be academic as you are as well, how does a country find that happy medium between exploiting fossil fuel and maintaining the diversity and the quality that our environment currently affords us?
It's a tight needle to thread, and I don't have an answer for that. But I know it's a balance that has to be struck. I, as a big proponent of the environment, would tend to fall out on the side of more preservation of our forest. But at the same time, fossil fuel is the order of the day. It is right now the thing that will bring in the greatest amount of revenue over the next several years in Guyana. And so we cannot discount that, or we cannot sort of put that on the shelf. So we have to sort of walk and chew gum. I think we have to balance both. I don't have a good answer as to how you do it. I haven't studied it, I haven't looked at it closely, but it's something that ought to be looked into.
Do you get the impression that this government has given it the serious kind of consideration that it needs?
I don't know. Guyana is at a very, very interesting point in its history. Let me invoke Marcus Brutus. Brutus in Shakespeare, Brutus say, there is a tide in the affairs of men which have taken at a flood, leads to fortune, omitted all their journeys, are bound in shallows and in miseries. On such a full sea are we now afloat, and we should take the tide,
Well done, well done.
or lose our venture, right?
Yes,
I would submit there is a tide in the affairs of nations.
yes.
And Guyana is on that full sea. And the question, I think, for Guyana, will we seize the moment or lose our venture?
My question was even simpler.
Yes.
From what all that you have paid lots of attention to oil and
Yes.
gas, from all that you've seen, have we given sufficient consideration and attention to that balance?
I haven't seen the evidence that would suggest that. I haven't seen it. And I am someone who deals with evidence. I'm not really in the best position to speak about what the government of Guyana has done and has not done. I can only give my opinion based on what I've read in the papers and what I've seen. And I have not seen the evidence that suggests that the government has done that. I haven't seen it. If they have, it's a secret, because I haven't seen it.
Now, does that pose us in that dilemma that you just mentioned by quoting Shakespeare? Which way? The venture or destruction?
Well, the thing is, you cannot just assert yourself into prosperity. You have to have the institutional arrangements.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to have the systems. You've got to have mature systems. And you've got to have a plan and a vision. And all of those things come together will move us forward. I haven't seen the evidence that we have those things in place. And so that concerns me.
It does.
Yes, I haven't seen. I've looked and I haven't seen it. You cannot just simply assert it. You have to do it. You have to take the deliberate steps to transform the nation and the country. And it's hard work, and it's not just saying we're going to do it. Somebody's famous for saying that which can be asserted without evidence can be rejected without evidence. And therefore, I think it was Christopher Hitchens or somebody. But at any rate, if you're just asserting that somehow oil is coming and we're going to just miraculously do well, I question whether or not that's true. Without the necessary institutional arrangements, the technical skills, and those type of things that are a significant part of the development.
We practically have no regulatory mechanism. And that's not to knock the Department of Energy. It's not to knock the GGMC. But how can you, in that critical area, not only from an environmental perspective, fossil fuel exploitation, but also from the question of the Dutch disease,
Yes.
the resource curse,
Yes.
how can you not have the government, and I go back to this question as what's the role of the government? Shouldn't the government play a far, far greater proactive role in this matter?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I would advocate a very strong role for government, particularly at this stage. In business, there is the golden rule, right? He who has the goal makes the rule. Well, it doesn't appear to me like now Guyana has the gold, black gold, which is oil. No pun intended. We have gold, regular gold as well. We also have black gold, which is oil. But we're not making the rules. It doesn't appear to me that we're making the rules. Here's the thing, Chris. If I brought a set of raw materials to build a house, I brought all the raw materials. It's mine. I grow the tree, chop the wood, I brought it. And then you bring the expertise, and we build the house. Whose house is it? We're co-equal partners.
Yeah.
I think we're, from what I've heard, and again, I don't like to interpret actions when I'm not in a position to evaluate all of the facts.
You're a very perceptive observer. So don't be
So-
over modest.
so-
Don't be
so-
over modest.
But it seems like to me, at worst, we should be a co-equal partner in the development of these resources. In fact, even better, because I would argue you can hire expertise. You can't hire more oil. You know, it's a limited, it's a depletable resource, and so it's precious. But at worst, we should be not a junior partner, but an equal partner in these types of arrangements. I'm not advocating a government takeover at all, because again, I'm a free market capitalist. But what I am advocating is a significant role where the government sits at that table as an equal partner with the multilaterals. It seems like we're being recolonized by big oil. That's just the way it seems. And that does not portend well for the development of Guyana.
But isn't big oil the epitome of the free market that you espouse so warmly?
Of course. It's they're allowed to do whatever they want in a free market. But we, all of our natural resources is really, it's a national patrimony. It belongs to the people. And so the
And
government...
often in case it's finite.
That is exactly right. And the government has a responsibility to provide the necessary stewardship over those resources that the benefit redounds to the people themselves. And in so doing, you have to make sure that the deals you cut are fair and balanced. I'm not saying we ought to kick out all the oil companies. We can't. Listen, we have the resources. We can't develop it without their expertise.
Yeah.
But their expertise means nothing without our resources, right? So it's a partnership of co-equal partners, and it doesn't appear to me that that's the deal. It appears like we are operating like a junior partner.
Well, not even as a partner. We almost we're passive. If you were to take, and viewers know my position on this contract. I don't want to go through it. Well, look, even on the royalty, we talk about 2% royalty. 2% of all petroleum produced and sold, less what is used by the oil companies. Now, what does sold mean? A friend was asking me that this morning.
I read it in the papers.
Yeah, it's amazing, and nobody has tried to define these matters. Listen, in less than a year, we will be producing oil.
Yes.
Now, the oil companies send a statement to you and say, these are my figures, and here is your cut.
Yeah.
And we haven't got a clue. Now, you're a CPA.
Yes.
You're an entrepreneur. You're a capitalist, as you keep.
Yes. It scares me. It scares me.
But because, and it scares you because I think you also are patriotic Hyanes.
I'm patriotic Guyanese. Guyana first. And that is why I'm advocating for a very strong position vis-a-vis the interest of... Listen, I was talking to a colleague of mine and we were talking about local content. And the whole idea of local content strikes me as odd because essentially you've got the natural resources. A company comes in, identify, develop it, and then you're turning around and bargaining with them how much of it you're going to be allowed to participate in. That seems patently, profoundly ridiculous to someone like me. Perhaps we ought to have a foreign content legislation where we limit. I mean, I'm not advocating the government takeover.
I like that idea.
But the idea that we are quibbling over how much of this industry, you're going to measure how much of this industry you allow us to play in? Yeah. That strikes me as patently ridiculous.
When there's one act, the 1939 Act, that says that the resources belong to the people
of course,
this country.
It does belong to the people.
Again, the absence of a depletion policy. Clearly, as we see,
yes,
Hess is all excited. Hess, his share price, his balance sheet has improved dramatically.
Yes.
The faster they deplete the resources.
Yes.
And I'm using the word, it's probably an emotive word rather than produce.
Yes.
But as you produce, you deplete the resources. That's the
Yes.
fact. The faster they deplete the resources, is better for them. Is it necessarily better for us?
Not necessarily better for us at all. No. I mean, what I'm saying, you cannot allow. You know, of all our research, history is best qualified to inform us. You cannot allow your welfare to be dictated or determined by someone else. You have to take the matters of your well-being in your own hands. And we as Guyanese have to do that. Listen, Guyana requires at this crucial time all hands on deck. And let me make a plug for as a diaspora member. You know, I was reading the papers this morning of a Barbadian cricketer who plays for England, and they were saying, why doesn't he play for the West Indies and all that type of stuff. But what you see happening in sports is whenever you are up at the big times, World Cup soccer, World Cup cricket, countries bring all of their talent from wherever they are, right? When we go into a cricket match, if our players that play in England, we bring them back. Why can't we do that with regards to the development of the country? We've got to bring in the expertise. There's Guyanese all over the world that are capable, that's got experience, knowledge, expertise, skills, all those types of things. If Guyana is going to go forward, you have to bring all your talent. There's lots of it home here, and there's lots of it in the diaspora. But we haven't made use of the diaspora talent in an effective way, I don't think.
Well, and I agree with you. But I don't think we've even started to make use
of the talent
we have right here.
No, I don't.
And that is frightening.
Yeah. So, you know, Chris, I sent you a note. Some of the things and again, I haven't gone through this whole thing in depth, but some of the things I saw is scary to me. Perhaps there's a good explanation. But one of the things is that the government agrees to pay Exxon's income tax. That's sort of a lose-lose situation in this sense. For the government to reduce that tax burden, Exxon would have to increase its expenses.
Yeah.
If Exxon increases its expenses, it gets to claim it in cost recovery.
Yeah.
It's lose-lose.
Yeah.
It's those types of things to me warrant further inquiry. They warrant further inquiry. It's not to say that it's bad, good in between. I don't know. I've not been hired to do.
When you say warrant further inquiry, are you suggesting that the whole negotiation process may have somehow been tainted or flawed?
I don't know. I wasn't in the room. What I have is the finished product.
But the inferences that can be drawn.
The inference could be drawn that we may not have done this in the best interest of the Guyanese people. That's what I can best determine based on the little bits and pieces and the experts who've looked at this thing closely. I don't do oil, but I do numbers. And when I look at the numbers, I mean, listen, I was one of the first. I wrote a paper in cost recovery and laying it out and mapping it out, and before anybody start. And again, we have to take this very seriously. This is not child's play. This is, I mean, you know, these companies are billion-dollar organizations with 200-300 people in their legal department and their finance and accounting. You can't send 4 or 5 people to go audit Exxon. It doesn't work that way. I mean, and that's reality. And it's that level of seriousness that I haven't seen. Perhaps it exists, and I don't live here, and maybe you all have seen it, but it's that level of seriousness that would give you comfort that we're on the right track. Things are being done. I fear that the benefits of this, and we don't have time to get into today, I fear that the benefits will not redound to the people. And that is why I'm one of the first persons, regardless of who says it, the records are there, to advocate cash payments. I gave an interview to Stabroek way back when, and I did an interview with Card Nation in Washington, D.C., where I advocated it. And then everybody came on board later. But I advocated cash payments not as an ideal solution, but because I know good intentions aren't enough. They're necessary but not sufficient. And you can't take good intentions to the bank. You can't eat good intentions. And despite all of the good intentions and all of the plans, time after time, the benefit never redounds to the people. So, what do? You give the people. They have basic needs. They want uniforms, school books, food, that type of thing. Give them some money to buy some stuff. It's not going to break the bank. Not all of the money. But I think that's a sure way of making sure that people benefit, direct benefit. And I advocated that a long time ago. Now, I didn't come up with a 5,000. I don't think you could come up with a number. I think it's ridiculous to even suggest a number. But
how would you arrive at a reasonable number?
Well, I think you'd have to study it. I mean, that's where you need to bring in the talented people who know, who look at models, see where it's been done, and study it. And you could do several things. I don't know how sophisticated the tax system, but you can tie those distributions. First, you have to make it taxable. And you could say if you use those distributions to go to school, we'll give you a break. Or if you use it to buy your first home, we'll give you a break. Or if you use it to invest in something green. I mean, there are ways you can tie policy to that behavior so that it's not just a free giveaway. And that way you use policy to drive the type of behavior we know makes for a good life.
Now, do you, under that model, and we're not talking about quantum, we're not talking about amount now.
Yeah.
We're just talking principle.
Yeah.
Do you think Clive Thomas's idea, every household, rich, ultra rich, poor, ultra poor, should be given the same kind of sum?
Off the top of my head, I would say no. And to even come up with a number, to me, it suggests that we lack the right level of seriousness. How could you know what the number is? Who could come up with that number? Mm-hmm. We have to take these things very seriously. But to answer your question, no, everybody shouldn't. It should be needs-based. I mean, there's several ways to structure this. A need-based model would be one way. The greater the need, the greater the,
Now,
it's like a negative income tax. The earned income credit they have in the U.S., it's need-based.
The question of sanctity of contract. President Granger touted it. Obviously, the oil companies are touting it.
Yes.
The private sector people always talk about the sanctity of contract. What are the implications? First of all, would you support any attempt at the renegotiation of any of the oil contracts?
Yes.
And what would you say are the implications for trying to do that?
Well, first of all, yes, I would support a renegotiation of those contracts.
So you don't subscribe to the sanctity of contract, that so-called sacred principle.
No, I think there is some fluidity. These types of things are very complex, and I think when companies and governments enter into these things, there is some idea that they can be renegotiated, amended, added here or there. There is a downside to it. You don't want to send the idea to the rest of the world that you don't honor your word. You're someone that goes back on your word. So we don't want that to be the message. But there is a proper way to approach some of these companies. You sit down at a table and work it out and come up with something that's fair for both parties. Of course. By all means. Listen, at the time a contract is based on the idea that both parties are fully informed at the time of negotiations. And I would suggest that probably was not the case. So on the one hand, yes, there is the sanctity element that we have to preserve, but I don't think it precludes us in a cooperative way revisiting those contracts and seeing if we can come up with something that's more equitable.
But when it has what is called a stability clause that says you can't touch the contract unless the oil company agrees.
Yeah.
How do you get it done? And
you need. Listen, it's been done before in other parts of the world. You need people who have done it before, and listen. And again, I want this message to go out loud and clear. I am not at all knocking the big oil companies. They have to do what they do. They have to report to their shareholders. But I don't think they're against revisiting certain aspects of those contracts. I think they probably would welcome something like that if it's done right. Because the thing is, everybody can win. Everybody can win. I don't get into the numbers 2%, 10%, because I haven't looked at it close enough to know those things. 2 sounds like a very small number. It's just 2. But that doesn't mean anything. I don't know. There's people who do this for a living, and those are the people that should be in the room having this type of discussion. I'm not one of those people. But I think it's worth going back to the table. What the worst they could say is no. But listen, they're now beginning to explore Guyana. And I would imagine they all want to continue to play. And so there are opportunities to play down the road. I don't think anybody would want to take themselves out of that opportunity by taking a very firm position, a non-negotiable position.
You're an entrepreneur, a capitalist. You enter into a relationship with someone and you make a certain investment based on that arrangement.
Yes.
Wouldn't any alteration affect your own position, your own return on capital, your internal rate of return, or whatever the lawyers and economists like to call it?
Yeah, of course, but perhaps all of that was factored into the deal. You know, there are times when you factor future adjustments into the deal, so perhaps that was all factored into the deal. And so there's room to, a lot of times when you negotiate, right, you go all the way over where you want your position to be. So there's always room to come back. Mm-hmm. So I don't for a second believe that if you pull back a little, it affects their IRR and those types of things. I don't think so.
You also raise this issue about equal negotiating strength.
Yes.
Now, if you're negotiating, businessman,
yes,
and someone stupidly, recklessly, irresponsibly enters into a deal with you, would you expect them to honor it? Especially if that person is a government?
So, because I was brought up differently, my human instincts will kick in over my market instincts. I would not take advantage over someone who was not aware of what he or she has to offer. It's just not the way I operate.
But should you presume that a minister of government would know what he's negotiating?
I don't think you can make that assumption. Listen, these oil companies have worked all over the world. They know. In fact, it's the reverse. They know that developing countries don't have that expertise. And when we show up in that room, some of us are being in that room for the first time.
I think you're putting us down. I mean, listen.
No, I'm not putting us down. It's no, not at all. I think no.
You know, Floyd, I make this point. Whether you're negotiating an oil contract, a bauxite contract, a logging contract, a gold contract, a commercial contract, buying and selling, you have some reasonable ideas. Okay, what am I giving? What am I getting?
Yes.
Those are some basic things. You have some idea, what do I want? I start with these resources. They're finite.
Yes.
They belong to us, our patrimony, and therefore future generation. You try to protect it.
Yes.
So
I agree. But I think, Chris, and I'm not an attorney, so I yield to you in this particular
No, but
instance.
I'm not asking as an attorney.
But I really think the hydrocarbon industry is a very complex, very, very complex industry. And it requires some amount of subject matter Listen, some of the terminologies and those type of things they use in that world, we may not have heard of those things.
You know, seriously, and I don't like to say this, but I'll say it. I have a master's in oil and gas.
Okay.
It's not as complex. I mean, look, this is a commodity you're negotiating.
Yes, it is.
And you are bringing to the table your own contribution. As you said, you have the building material, you have the land.
Yeah.
And somebody comes and says, look, I have the contracting skills. That's the analogy is not far-fetched.
No, I don't
ought
think.
to be careful.
Yeah, I don't think. Listen. So I always come back to something like this. You know, when I played soccer, and when we go out and we play the game, and if we lose, somebody comes in and say, "Was that our best effort? Was that our finest hour? Did we put our best 11 on the team?" And so the question for you all in Guyana. Did we have the best Guyanese in that
For
room?
all of us, no, don't say you all in Guyana
Right.
now. You were talking about the diaspora being part of
Right. So we, in the diaspora, I would ask, did we have the best Guyanese in that room? And I don't know. Did we have the best,
The problem
best
is-
talent in that room?
You know what is the sad thing, Floyd, in this? We don't even know who were in the room.
Oh, okay.
Up to now, the Granger administration has not said to us who negotiated this contract.
Did you ask them?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
That question has
Okay.
been asked
Okay.
time and time again.
Okay.
Now, we've got some minutes.
Okay.
So you would
This is good. This is
advocate,
getting started.
you would advocate some renegotiation. Call
I
it
would-
whatever you will.
Yes, I would advocate some renegotiation. Yes, definitely. I think it's a lopsided deal. It seems like.
But the government is saying, President Granger has said, no renegotiation. What would you say to President Granger?
He has said that. I
Yes.
didn't. Okay, I
he
wasn't
has.
aware.
And the government is on record as well. Not only President Granger, Carl Greenwich, Raphael Trotman, the Finance Minister Winston Jordan, they've all said the same thing.
If I were asked, and nobody has asked me, I would say, with all due respect, Mr. President, with all due respect, in the interest of the Guyanese people that you represent, do reconsider. Please reconsider your position.
Let's turn a short while to our politics, and without going too much into this side and that side or the case and all of that. There's a process called house-to-house registration taking place.
I've heard of it.
Yeah. Now, the Constitution guarantees every Guyanese the right to participate in the political process in
Right,
Guyana,
right.
whether you're resident in Guyana or not. In this house-to-house registration, has the diaspora, have you and those close to you considered the implications for house-to-house registration on your constitutional right?
I haven't. I don't. This is where I'm out of my depth. So a lot of what I will say is probably shooting from the hip. But I don't know enough about. I've heard different sides to that house-to-house thing. I've heard the argument that it's a delaying tactic, and I've heard
No,
the
but forget
argument.
all of that.
Okay.
I'm not getting in that.
Yeah.
That's the political.
Okay.
I'm speaking now about the implications for the diaspora. People come and knock on your door because you're not
Right.
here.
You're abroad.
And therefore you are deprived of a constitutional right. And it's
If you live in the diaspora,
yes,
but if you live
because
in the
you're not
diaspora,
participating in the house-to-house registration. That
but we don't vote, do we?
you have a right to vote.
Oh, I didn't. I'll tell you how little I know. I didn't know we can. It was overseas. Well, how does that work? We have a right to vote,
You
even
have
though
a right.
we're not resident in Guyana.
Well, even though you're not resident, there is no residency requirement.
Oh, I didn't know that.
There's none.
I did not know that. And so, if you're not here, you're not in that list. They knock
Well,
on your door. You're not in
You
that.
can't-
the
that's
scenario
correct.
you're
That,
going.
that's the point I'm making.
I don't think most diasporans know that. Or has given thought to that.
Mm-hmm.
I think like most political issues, it's sort of it's divided in a tribal way, and you align with your tribe.
Isn't that tragic?
I think that's the world. I mean, it's America's the Republicans and the Democrats, the Tories, and
It doesn't make it any less tragic.
Oh no, it's very tragic. The tribal, in fact, I would argue that the tribal nature of our politics, in large part, has given rise to the populism we see not just in America but around the world. You look at Europe and other places, and you see there is this rise of populism, and is a direct repudiation of the tribal nature of our politics,
Now,
which has served no one.
so there are implications,
Okay.
constitutional, human rights implication. But
I mistake this. I wasn't aware of that. Hadn't thought of it. I saw it as a purely
ask your partner,
political.
Paul.
I'll
Ask
ask
Paul.
him. I will.
Yeah.
I thought it was a purely internal Guyana politics
No,
thing.
it's not.
Some people are
It-
insisting, listen, we got to get everybody in the list, which sounds legitimate, and some people are saying, no, that's delay tactics. So, it's. So I just thought it was pure political.
No.
Thanks for bringing this to my attention.
Welcome. The question of tribal politics, and I go back to oil.
Yes.
The kind of resources that will flow, the absence of regulatory body. Yes, we have the Natural Resources Fund. What danger do these tribal politics pose for us as an oil state country in the context of the oil curse?
Oh, major danger, because you're taking the field with because you're tribal, you're divided, you're fractured, you're a fractured country. And a fractured country will never go to the negotiating table, or will never manage its assets and resources at an optimal capacity. You just can't, because you're doing it with half your talent. The very nature of the tribal politics puts people into camps. And so when this camp is in, you don't get the best of the country. You get the best that's in this camp, and vice versa. And I am saying, for the good of the country, you need to elevate the thinking beyond the tribal nature. It's very destructive. Very, very destructive. And we haven't even begun to address the resource curse and the Dutch disease, and those are just running around talking about it isn't enough.
That's ironic, because the Minister of Finance is on record as saying he thinks, well, some of us had already said
Yes.
that the Dutch disease had infected us.
Yes. It hasn't yet, but it will.
No, he actually, well,
I don't know what his measure is. He may not know.
no, BV Enterprise.
Yeah.
This is a major, long-standing company. Decided, look, it's better to give way to oil,
Yeah.
and we'll send our workers home.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing.
Yes,
That's what we mean.
It's the crowding out effect, but it's a little more than that, right? It's the movement of resources from above ground industries into oil.
Yeah.
And that has implications for your currency, the price of your local exports, those types of things. It's
And when it will really kick in is when the money starts to flow.
That's exactly right. Because as your currency strengthens, the price for your exports will go.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So one solution to that is to subsidize some of the above ground. I'm putting government in the problem.
I notice.
Subsidize the above ground industries, but again, it all has to be thought out.
But now, what's the role? And the operator is going to come pointing his finger at me a minute from now. What role can the diaspora play in drawing attention and saying, look, you can't exclude people, either locally or from the diaspora, in a matter as fundamental as this? What can you do?
I don't know that the diaspora can do much. The diaspora has been dying, chomping at the bits to get involved. And we have had government after government has come up with a diaspora plan, which has been, a little less than a joke. It hasn't worked. You have to have a serious commitment to engage the diaspora. And I don't think there's much we can do other than continue to be an advocate.
Unfortunately, there's not much more time we have. I'll have to say thank you, Floyd. It's been wonderful talking with you.
Thanks, Chris.
Operators and viewers, thank you, good night, and I'll see you next week.